So pretty much the whole of the UK have now heard the news that former Lostprophets lead man Ian Watkins has lost his life behind bars inside HMP Wakefield. This man was one of the worst criminals to ever come out of the music industry, who used his hero worshipping fans to take advantage of the most vulnerable people possible. But unlike many others, this story did not finish with the monster being locked up and left to rot away. Instead, this was a man who tried his hardest to carry out his sick fantasies from inside of the prison. All of which whilst having a target on his head for the best part of 12 years. This is a story of betrayal, police negligence, abuse, and unthinkable acts from a person who was hiding in plain sight. This is the life and death of Ian Watkins.
So in this video, we are going to detail the crimes of Ian Watkins in the most sensitive way that we possibly can. And ultimately, what we're going to try and do is tell you the truth of what actually happened. And while we want to give you the full story of the events and the case and all of these circumstances around it, we're not going to go into incredible levels of detail for two key reasons. One, Joey is a family man, and I know so many of you watching have families as well. And we don't want to divulge all of the information because, quite frankly, it is abhorrent, it's disgusting, and quite frankly, we don't want to give it any more oxygen than it already has. There's plenty of podcasts out there that detail it. There's plenty of stuff written. If you want to find full details of this case, you can do in your own right. And the second reason is that we want this video to be seen by as many people as we possibly can. We don't want it taken down. So we're going to intentionally gloss over certain areas. We're intentionally not going to talk about certain things. And we're not doing that not doing that to belittle anything. We're not doing that to sort of make out that these crimes aren't as bad as they were. We're just doing that for the reasons that I mentioned.
I mean, we're doing the complete opposite. If anything, we're saving some of the horrific natures of things. However, we will obviously try and go into as much detail as possible that we can without this video being taken down, and therefore we might use different terminology and things like that to try and give you guys an understanding of this terrible story.
Yep, and so many of you have been asking us to do this case, so we had to cover it. We did it as soon as we possibly could, got in the studio, did our research to make sure we had the full facts. And if you stick around to the end of the video, we're going to give you the latest breaking news that we have on the actual assassination and the murder and what actually went down in prison. So make sure you stick around to the end. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about who Ian Watkins was. Ian Watkins was born on the 30th of July 1977 in Merthyr Tydfil in Wales. Ian's biological father actually died when he was just 5 years old, and 3 years later his mother remarried a Baptist minister, John Davis, who raised Ian from then on. Ian's upbringing was described as incredibly normal, and he lived a very comfortable life, and he was loved by his mother and his stepfather. He grew up in a place called Pontypridd and attended a high school with a boy called Mike Lewis, who would go on to become a future bandmate when they grew up. Watkins was very academically successful, and as he did grow older into his teenage years, he identified as being straight edge, which means he abstained from any alcohol or substances. And music became a quite obvious passion for him. And in 1991, when he was just 14 years old, Watkins started a band called Aftermath with that gentleman, Mike Lewis, that we mentioned earlier on. This was a thrash metal band which wasn't mainstream at all, and after just 2 gigs, they actually disbanded. Next up was a band called Fleshbind, influenced by American hardcore punk, and they actually picked up a bit more traction, playing several shows, including supporting a huge band at the time, which was called Theta in London. Watkins actually played the drums in this band, and after the lead singer left in 1995 and his desire to be the leading man was declined by the rest of the band, Watkins moved on to his next project, which was called Public Disturbance. And again, Watkins wasn't the leading man, he was the drummer, but during this time he started working on a new band called Lostprophets, which started, as I say, as a side project, but Watkins became the main man. He was the lead singer and the front man, and at this point Watkins was only 22 years old. So during this time the band was still living very, very humbly indeed, and they weren't very well known at all. They didn't actually even have a record deal at this point, but they recorded 3 demos, And those demos were actually picked up by Kerrang! And there was another magazine called Metal Hammer. And those demos were so popular with the industry and the people that were around them at the time that they actually did get picked up by an independent label, and that was called Visible Noise. This was in 1999. So this is where they started gaining their popularity. Joey wasn't a rock fan or an alternative music fan at all. I'm going to put my hands up and say I was.
Yeah, I definitely didn't know the Lostprophets before, obviously, the case came to light. Being a true crime fan, even from a very young age, I was obsessed with it as soon as it came out, sort of thing. But I hadn't really heard of them. No. What I've gone on to learn is they're one of the most successful bands to ever come out of Wales.
Yep.
In terms of like Welsh artists and stuff like that, there's a handful, but the Lostprophets, in terms of their popularity at the peak of their success, were very, very well established. So much so that, as you say, you were a fan of them, weren't you?
Yeah, hugely so. And this is the hardest thing. We've actually discussed this before, probably off camera actually, about whether you can listen to artists in which you know that they've done awful, horrendous things. Like the one that I always ask people is, do you still listen to Michael Jackson music without, with knowing what happened in the Neverland Ranch and that sort of thing? And the Lostprophets is alleged. I mean, we've had testimony have you watched the documentaries? The testimony from the two guys is brutal.
I'm just covering our arse, mate.
Fair point.
Do you know what a better example I would actually use would be?
R. Kelly?
No, I would say Gary Glitter. Because Rock and Roll Part 2, you know that tune?
Yep.
What movie was it? The Joker movie was heavily criticised, wasn't it?
Yep.
For using Rock and Roll Part 2 as the Joker comes down the stairs when he's dancing, he walks down the stairs. Obviously, that's Gary Glitter, a prolific kiddie fiddler. So it's a discussion we've had off camera before in terms of like, can you still enjoy music from a band if, something or from a singer? And
I'm very interested to know what you guys say, because like for me, the moment in which this came out, I'd never listened to a track from that moment on of the Lostprophets. And beforehand, I would say that they maybe were in my top 30 artists on like iTunes. Because remember, we're talking about, 2000 we're still at this point. We're talking about potentially an era pre-iPods.
Yeah, so mate, I don't think you should have any shame whatsoever in the ignorance of not knowing anything about the actual personal lives of any of the, was it 6 band members?
Yep, six band members.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, there's no shame in you saying you was a Lostprophets fan.
I'd
like to know what the comments were.
I have to say, fan, I didn't even know his name, and I didn't know any of the band members' names. So that gives you the context of how much I knew about their personal lives.
Though?
Oh God, yeah. I listened to the songs for sure. Yeah, I did. And actually, looking back now, I have to say some of the lyrics are troublesome. But let's not go too much into that. We'll talk about the lyrics. We'll talk about the rest of the tracks later on. But I want to go back to November 2000, because as they did just sign that record deal, they produced their first ever album. This was called The Fake Sound of Progress, and this album was recorded in just 2 weeks, and it was very rudimentarily put together. It only cost £4,000 to make the entire album, so that sort of gives into context about the levels in which we're operating here. And this album was released, and it gained a huge amount of fans, cult fans at the time, and they were so passionate about this album, so much so that they gained the awareness of Columbia Records, which was a huge record label. And I believe actually that was an American record label, and they had huge artists at the time on their books, including people like Beyonce, Aerosmith, Ricky Martin, and System of a Down. They were all part of Columbia Records. So, and that's just not even an exhaustive list. They had other huge people on that. So for the Lostprophets to even be in the same room as those people, even considered to be signing with Columbia Records, was a huge thing. And they actually did get signed by Columbia Records. They created a new record deal. They left the old independent label behind. And so much so they actually re-recorded that original first album, and they re-released it. It was so successful that it hit platinum level in the UK and sold over 120,000 copies in the US. Remember, this is a small band from Wales. Very few artists in the UK, if ever, break America. It's a huge thing. First album, 120,000 sales of that, which is just ridiculous. It shows you the context of how big they actually were. Even in 2000, I was only 8 years old. They were a huge deal even then. And they were such a big deal that they were performing gigs in Glastonbury, in Reading living in Leeds. And Watkins even appeared on an episode of Nevermind the Buzzcocks, which shows you how mainstream he actually had become.
Yeah, and I'd say like mainstream to the point where obviously no one was to suspect anything before things came out, but he had like high profile relationships and stuff. I think it was quite short lived, but he had a relationship with Fern Cotton, didn't he? And
yes, I found that out afterwards. I didn't remember that at the time, but yeah, huge.
And there were a couple. I think there were a couple of others. I'm sure you can go down the rabbit hole and look into it. But he was, he was pictured and said to have had either shorter or longer relationships with a couple of high-profile names, celebrities.
Yep, there you go. And I think that is a testament to how he was viewed at the time. He was viewed as a family man. He was viewed as being very sort of wholesome. He was very charismatic. As I say, he was still straight edge at this point as well. So people in the industry thought that he was very charismatic, and he had actually a really good reputation amongst the industry. He wasn't known as one of these rockers that would take the piss. He wasn't known for any sort of bad behavior at this time. So, the band was on a huge upward trajectory, right? So that starts us off now into 2004. They actually released their second album, which was called Start Something. And again, huge global hit, had huge singles within that. And then they started doing even more tours. They opened for Linkin Park. They were playing on Metallica's tour alongside Slipknot. And in 2006, their fame actually really, I would say, peaked. And this is where their third album, Liberation Transmission, came out. And that actually reached #1 in the UK album charts. Watkins was increasingly isolating himself from his other band members. He would request private dressing rooms, and he would actually even miss some shows at that period of time. And part of the reason for this is because Watkins actually started abusing substances, and very quickly, almost overnight it seems, became a bit of an addict, and sort of everything around him was sort of collapsing at this point. And in 2006, a huge moment in this case actually happened. There was a chance message, which connected Watkins with a very, very controversial but key character in this story. Partially responsible, this person was, for actually bringing Watkins down. Her name was Joanne Mjadzelics. Have you struggled to visit some of your favourite sites recently? That is because the UK government have passed the Internet Safety Act, which means you have to put your personal details in and basically pass a third-party check to access absolutely anything. Well, the good news is you can bypass all of that rubbish with a VPN, and the only ones that we use is Surfshark.
And if you click the link in the description, you can get 4 months for free off of a year-long subscription. So make sure you hit that link in the description now.
So how does this all work? Well, basically, because of this government legislation, you have to prove you're old enough to watch certain content. But if, for example, you set your location in Canada, which I've done before, I've heard that you'd get absolutely no issues, and you can access these websites with no verification needed at all. And Surfshark can keep your data private by masking your IP address.
And if you're like me and you want to watch the football or the boxing, getting a Surfshark membership can enable you to do this and help you avoid all of the fees that the British broadcasters are charging right now.
And Surfshark is available on all of your devices, from a Chrome extension on your PC to tablet apps to phone apps and loads more. I actually use the phone app all the time, especially with the way that the modern world is going. That is the simplest way to do it. And you access Surfshark with a very simple click of a button. You can set what location you want to go to. You can pick anywhere in the world. And with that one simple click, you can get access to that location. There's no delays. There's no buffering. It is as simple as that. And we only recommend products that we use ourselves, and we use Surfshark all the time. So remember, if you want a mega deal on us, all you need to do is hit the link in the description, or you can use code Joey and Josh at checkout, or you can actually even scan the QR code on screen. Remember, that will get you 4 extra months for free off a year-long subscription on Surfshark. And they even give you a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is absolutely no risk in trying it out. Thank you so much for Surfshark for supporting the channel, and thank you so much to you guys for supporting us. We really, really appreciate it. Now let's get back into the episode.
Didn't they actually meet through Joanne being a fan of the Lostprophets as well?
This is a crazy part of the story that I can't quite believe was even true, to be honest with you. Joanne messaged the MySpace for Lostprophets. So back in the day, MySpace was a thing, and you could just send someone a direct message.
It weren't a thing.
And
it was
the
thing.
thing.
It was the thing.
And Joanne has done media appearances and press conferences after the fact, and she actually talks about this chance meeting. She was actually recommended to listen to the Lostprophets by a friend, and the friend had sent her the Lostprophets MySpace page. And I don't know if you remember this, Joey, but back in the day, you could have a track playing as you went onto a MySpace page.
Of course, Can you remember that.
Remember what the track was that you put on yours?
It's for this exact episode. It's awful for me to say it.
What was it?
Ignition.
Oh,
Kelly.
It's so bad that you just
used to click on my MySpace and it used to be, call me up on the phone, up in the rain.
You were a smooth man even then. Like you had the R&B. I respect it.
No one suspected R. Kelly of anything by the way, when I had MySpace.
I think about 15 years ago.
When I
you
had
were
MySpace,
about 12 as well.
Years old, right? So forgive me, okay? I might have had R. Kelly on my MySpace. I had a load of other ones that weren't wrong uns.
Yeah. So basically, Joanne sends this message. She's expecting the Lostprophets MySpace to be like someone behind the scenes, a manager, a customer service person, to write her back. And she was originally asking just how does she buy tickets for shows, because she liked the tracks that she'd heard on the MySpace page. She wanted to go and see a live performance. She gets a message back. Now, the message back was directly from Ian Watkins. Can you believe that? First of all, why is he even operating that? They are a huge band, commercially successful, making millions of dollars probably at this point. And he's in charge of the MySpace. Weird.
It's weird, but when you go on to learn about his behaviour and what we already know from covering so many cases where we discuss predatory behaviour, it becomes a little bit less weird. Maybe.
It makes sense. So, Joanne was obviously in awe of this man. He was successful, he was rich, he was powerful. He had this, very successful band, as we said. But obviously, he's a horrendous human being, but she has no idea of this. She's completely in awe of him. She actually falls for him. They start a digital relationship. They share text messages, phone conversations, emails, but the relationship very quickly goes into real life.
And the problem is, you say, obviously he's a horrendous human being and whatnot. Joanne didn't know this.
No idea.
We didn't know this. The public didn't know this. And we'll get into the sort of more controversial elements of whether or not anyone did know this. But what we do know is at that time, he as I say, he was pictured out on dates with Fern Cotton. He was
on BBC.
Appearing on talk show panels.
Yeah.
I just kind of feel like there's a saying, hiding in plain sight for a reason.
Yeah.
Because some people hide in plain sight, and that's exactly what he was doing at this time.
100%. So a bit of background on Joanne herself. She was actually from Doncaster in South Yorkshire. She was a mother of a young child herself, and she actually did work as an escort as well, right? And I only mentioned that because it's going to become relevant in a little bit later on in the story, right?
And just quickly, being that she messaged him through a social media website, and back in the day, I don't know whether it's a trend, maybe it was like we were kids and kids still do this and we're older now, we don't do it. But how often do you really post something on social media?
Now, not that often.
Never really.
No.
I might post a story for a podcast we've done or something.
Yeah.
In terms of a personal picture, never. Back then, in them days,
everything.
You put everything up. You
everything
take
was
pictures
online.
in your front room and put them up and whatever. So the chances are, Joanne has a child. That child's probably on Joanne's MySpace. So when Ian Watkins messages back, the probability, in my opinion, is that he knows this is a mother.
He knew. And he then started the next phase of the relationship. Obviously, they started digitally. He invited her to a hotel, meet up in London. And from that moment on, they started a sexual relationship. They actually met up. They met in that hotel room. And again, Joanne is just so in awe of this guy. She's smitten. So much so, Joey, I don't know if you know this, she actually got a tattoo of his initials on her back.
That's mad. That is mad. And it kind of gives me a little bit of understanding and let me clarify, not agreeing, but understanding in terms of when we get into the case a little bit more, why Joanne was maybe perceived as a groupie,
Yeah, and this is the thing. When we get into the details of Joanne's story in a little bit, we'll let you guys make your own opinion up on whether she was complicit or, you know, or whether she was just someone that was manipulated herself. She is a very controversial character in this story. And I think a lot of people have very strong views on her involvement and how far she let it go. So let me get into that and tell you how far it actually got. In 2007, the relationship took a very, very dark turn. And this is where we start to see the true Ian Watkins. In one of their meetings, Watkins said that he loved sleeping with underage fans and taking their virginities. And he went further. He actually said that he wanted to get Joanne pregnant so he could abuse their baby. So I feel at this point, if I was in Joanne's shoes, bearing in mind the message that he just sent to her, I would have run a mile. I would have been completely terrified of this person and also very concerned about the behaviour. But she doesn't do that. No. Is that a bit weird?
I feel like if I was in Joanne's shoes, I mean, look, she's a massive fan of the band, blah, 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 whatever. I'm a fan of loads of people. If they disclose to me that they're a nonce, I'm outing them.
Exactly. And this is the thing. She actually threatens Watkins to go to the police. And this is another crazy part of the story. Watkins at this point basically begs her not to go to the police, and he goes to his lawyers instead. And what they do is they draft up an NDA. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, effectively what they call in the press a gagging order.
Yeah.
Basically, she's not allowed to say anything. It's a document, and it has very strict punishments to say if you do ever disclose confidential information or anything that is included within that document, there's serious consequences off the back of that, mainly financial. And bearing in mind her situation, financial consequences would have been incredibly bad. Now, again, sick people that wrote this document up, can I just say?
Yep.
The lawyers involved,
100%.
Absolutely disgraceful that they even did that in the first place. But Joanne again has an opportunity at this point to run away. She has an opportunity to not sign the document. She has an opportunity to go to the police again and make sure that she's told her piece and said what she really feels. She doesn't do that. She signs the NDA. She takes £2,000 from Ian Watkins for doing it, for signing the NDA. And they continue having conversations. They continue seeing each other. Just crazy that she even did that.
Do you know if they were intimate with each other in this time?
They were intimate the entire time. From the moment that they met up in London, they had a sexual relationship. And during this time, they had still had a sexual relationship.
Nothing had ever come to fruition of Ian's sort of fantasies about Joanne's child.
Up to this point, nothing. So I think what's obvious is that she was being manipulated. But again, you know, beyond the message that she had received, there was nothing sort of too concerning beyond that message. The message itself was horrendous and should have, again, as I say, brought her to run away. She didn't go to the police. She should have gone to the police at that point. But the abuse culminated in 2008 when Watkins shares an image with Joanne in which we are not going to detail what this is in great detail. All I'm going to say is it involves a young girl and it involves abuse of this young girl.
Yeah.
Right? Joanne sees this message.
Can you just quickly, just so they understand when we're saying young girl, can you give a ballpark of an age range?
She was 4. She was 4 years old, right? And again, I don't want to go too much into this, but Watkins sent Joanne a message and said that this girl was being flirty to him. So that just shows you the mindset that he was in. And to be honest with you, this was a step too far for Joanne. I'm glad she did this at this point. She went to Child Services, she reported Watkins, and she compiled some of the messages that he had sent her previously and basically had evidence that should have been enough for the police to be really, really concerned.
So there's a question to be asked in terms of, did Joanne, because obviously this was a sort of on-off relationship, right? Did Joanne, on that first initial sort of incident, did she do the right thing, go to the police, whatever? And then after that, did she, in your opinion, build a case against him? Or did she hope that she could change him?
I think there's a bit of both. Perhaps before this incident, perhaps she thought that she could change him, and perhaps she thought that she could, you know, make things better. I think this is non-rational at this point.
No.
I think she's so in awe of the man and she's so manipulated by him and so in love with him that I think she was complicit at the start.
Because any person with sanity,
yeah,
right, would say that the second you know what this guy is about, you run them off.
You do. But again, at this point, I think what's clear, we need to give both sides of the story. She did go to the police. She also went several times to the police. So she reported this evidence. She then went back to the police station several times to try and push the case along. And she didn't really hear from the police. So much so that it took them 4 months to even go to her house to take a video statement. It took them so long. And after that, we're now in May 2009. The police wrote to Joanne and said to her that they didn't have enough evidence to proceed with the case. Now, I can't believe that, bearing in mind she's got evidence of messages, she's got images, a couple of images. I think it's a disgrace at this point that the police aren't even investigating it.
1,000,000%.
Insufficient evidence. By the way, I feel that there's enough evidence at this point. Get a warrant, search the computer. You would have found a lot more if you had. They didn't do that.
It's to a point, in my opinion, where you have to question police integrity.
You do.
You do have to question it. Because if someone says to you, I've gone on the internet and read that this guy's a nonce or whatever, fair enough, yeah, like whatever, right? But regardless of whether you think this is a super fan, a groupie, this girl's got this guy's initials tattooed on her back and stuff like that, once you're presented with the evidence, it's your job to go and investigate that. And whether or not that investigation leads to something that you're able to pin on someone is actually irrelevant. The fact is, they didn't investigate.
You've got to investigate. And it gets even worse than that, Joey. They actually threatened her with harassment. So she's actually done a This Morning interview. In fact, let me show you the This Morning interview now.
I don't know what went wrong because I reported the images that he'd sent me. I went straight to the Chief Constable about the images that he sent me. When he sent me them in 2011, I was put in touch with a detective sergeant that I'd previously dealt with, and he just couldn't be bothered. And then 3 more times after that, I took my laptop into the police station. They refused to take it. When 2 officers did view one of the images, over 16, they said.
It's at this point, we've basically in 2009 and now all the way to the middle of 2010, Joanne cuts contact with Watkins. She intentionally doesn't speak to him. She's trying to, again, get the police to do something, and they're not doing anything. But midway through 2010, Watkins messaged Joanne and she actually replied. She didn't just reply, Joey. She actually apologized to Watkins for not speaking to him and for accusing him of what she accused him of. And this is where the story really gets murky. We don't truly understand whether Joanne's relationship at this point was trying to build evidence on Watkins, which is what she said after the fact. She said she was only maintaining a relationship with him to build evidence so that she could bring him down. I don't necessarily believe that.
I think that it could be a little bit, and I'm going to use this phrase here and then explain it because obviously this isn't the case and a lot of you will know this phrase, but you might be able to see where I'm coming from. Do you think it could be a little bit of Stockholm syndrome?
It could be. It could be. And also, I think, again, in that period of time, maybe she missed the glitz and the glamour and the lifestyle and staying in nice hotels and having a nice life and all of the things that would come with having a relationship with Ian Watkins at that time, bearing in mind, as we've said, how popular he really, really was. So I think potentially she missed out on that lifestyle, and maybe that was a reason why she goes back.
I think that I could say on a level which is, you know, a grain of sand in the Sahara Desert in comparison to the Lostprophets, you'd be surprised with the most minimal bit of clout, you know, all of a sudden what women are prepared to throw themselves at you and stuff like that, like literally minimal. So to see a band like that and the lead singer and the front man and whatnot, I'm not that surprised that she did try to maintain a relationship with him. I'm disgusted by it.
Yep.
And obviously it leads us on to, you know, ultimately, was she doing it for the greater good, which is highly controversial. It doesn't surprise me that there are people on this earth that would still think, you know, maybe I'll just block all that out and hope that someone changes or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, on much smaller scales, we see it in sort of domestic relationships. Abused partners will stay with their partners because they'll think, oh, maybe one day he'll stop, you know, maybe one day I won't be the victim of domestic abuse or whatever, or, you know, he might be an alcoholic, maybe one day I'll stop drinking. Like, these things happen. And although that is absolutely nothing compared to what Ian Watkins was, I think that my personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion, is that Joanne was doing two things at once. I think she was building a case against him, but at the same time, I think that she, and it's just my interpretation, she might have been willing to drop that whole case if he changed his ways and, you know, wasn't into that.
Yep. And so they now meet up. Next point in the story is they meet up and they go to a hotel in Leeds. So they actually take that, you know, digital relationship that they're having at the time, again, back into real life. And this is where Joanne is left alone with Ian's laptop. His laptop is unlocked and she sees a video on this laptop, which is the most serious form of abuse that you can imagine, right? Again, I'm not going to detail what it was, but it involves another young girl. And again, the most serious. That's all I can say at this point. And she actually says she chucks Ian Watkins out of the hotel room at this point. And effectively, that is the last time she says she saw him in person.
Just
right?
quickly for the viewers, when you say abuse of
a minor,
was it clearly visible that abuse was coming from
clearly visible? Yeah. Clearly visible. And again, like, we're doing this intentionally. We're trying to sort of like talk around it, right? I don't want to go into great levels of detail on it, but at the same time, South Wales police actually got another complaint. This time it wasn't from Joanne, it was from another police force. It was the Metropolitan Police Force in London. And they had got an accusation from another woman about Ian Watkins' behaviour. And again, South Wales police did nothing. It gets to the point now where, remember earlier on I mentioned that she was an escort, and I mentioned that there were other women in the scene, and we'll get into this in a second. I think the South Wales police, there were two things going on here. They didn't want to prosecute someone that was famous because of how important that was to the local area. Bearing in mind, this guy was a poster boy for the valleys.
Yep.
That's what they actually described him as, right? The poster boy for the valleys. He actually did campaigns for the area to sort of bring tourism and make people aware of the valleys, right? But I think they were also very suspect of the types of women that were going forward. And it shows their prejudice here. They weren't respecting the people that were coming forward.
When have we ever covered a true crime case that involves escorts that haven't been neglected by the police?
Yeah. It's a tale as old as time, isn't it?
It's a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
Escorts are neglected by police massively. And escorts, I'm not saying an escort has never lied about anything or whatever, but there's a reason why serial killers and things like this will pick escorts as their primary target, and that is because they are some of the most vulnerable members of society.
Yep.
So I think that the fact that, you know, the police on both occasions, South Wales police, did you say?
Yep.
Yeah, South Wales police on
Police.
both occasions failed to even follow up on it was pretty much a disgrace. And do you know what it is? At the same time as this, mate, like, there were so many reports as well of other escorts that he had taken out and other escorts that he had had back to hotel rooms. And what he would do, according to some of these alleged escorts that have come forward and spoken since, is what he would do is he would do what we in the UK call testing the waters, right? So he would maybe test the waters and say about things involving underage children and minors and stuff like that and these sort of acts. And I think that some of the escorts might have thought, what the fuck? And some of them might have thought, do you know what? I'm an escort. I've been with a lot of weird guys, and some guys like to have fantasies and role plays and stuff like that and whatever. And they're probably a lot more harder conditions to these sort of things than maybe we would be. So a lot of the time, he was getting away with telling these escorts about these sort of fantasies and stuff like this. But some have come forward and said that he actually showed them footage as well. Now, I think that a few of these were actually while the band were touring in America. Obviously, a lot of the band lived out in America as well. It was only Ian that stayed living at home. So a lot of these didn't go forward to the police at the time and stuff like this. But yeah, this wasn't an isolated incident.
No.
This is two incidents that we're speaking about now. And as well as that, so much online speculation in terms of forums, in terms of, you know, things like Reddit and things like that. social media platforms like MySpace about at the time, there was a lot of online speculation about Ian Watkins at the time. So it does blow my mind that the police didn't follow through on any of this.
Yeah, 100%, right? And all this time, Watkins is living an incredibly normal life. He's still traveling all around the world. He's spending time in LA. He's doing huge performances. He is unabated by the police. He's not being stopped. He's not even being questioned by the police at this time. And during this time as well, he's still messaging Joanne, and he's saying that he's got a fan in America. He called her a junkie in America that was open for him to be abusing their child, right? So he's got so much stuff that he's saying to Joanne even during this time. And he's, again, not just testing the waters, but he's pushing Joanne. He knows that Joanne wants to go to the police already. She's threatened him with that already. And he's still pushing and pushing and pushing. And again, Joanne does the right thing at this point. She goes to the South Wales police. She says to the same Child Protection Services people, the same accusations. She shows them pictures and images. He sent her 3 more indecent images that she said she desperately tried to go to South Wales police and show. And once again, they ignored them. So there's this detective at the time, Detective Sergeant Andrew Whelan. He was the one that was assigned to the case. She goes to this guy and she says, I have got evidence on my phone that you need to see and I need to share with you because you need it for the case. Do you know what this guy said?
What?
He didn't even check the phone. Didn't even look at the phone. Didn't even go through any of the evidence that she
So she has gone to that detective who's in charge of the case and said, I have got evidence against Ian Watkins proving that he is a nonce. And he has said, I don't want to see the evidence, basically.
Literally that. So there was an inquiry that we'll get onto later on after the fact. And they showed, they didn't deem this to be the case, but they showed that there was failings in the police. This guy got off scot-free, this detective. I think he should have been sacked. I think he should never work as a police officer again.
100%.
But he's got off with it again.
Still work as a police officer.
Yeah, this is the thing.
Yeah.
It's a disgrace.
Absolutely mental.
Yeah.
Absolutely mental.
But this is the thing, like, there's so many police failings throughout all of this, and I hope we've described that in the story of Joanne so far. She was trying her best to get the police to do something, and they did just nothing. So this is the next point in the story, right? We're into 2012 now.
Well, we always just quickly look back on cases and we think, what if they had have got him that first time? You know, Yorkshire Ripper's a really good one for an example of this. You know, I think he was interviewed after the 3rd murder.
Sounds about right.
When they traced a banknote back to where he worked, or a pound note back to the yard that he worked at, and he was interviewed and whatnot. And there's always that thing, that question in your head of like, God, how many lives would have been saved if you had have acted straight away?
Literally.
And it's in this case, you know, how many less minors would have been abused if you had have acted when this woman came forward and gave you, a lot of people would determine as concrete evidence, Josh.
Literally. And it gets worse and worse there. So what we'll do, right, we'll let you sort of go through how he was caught in a second, right? I just want to very quickly sort of go through the events of 2012. Joanne has been trying for 4 years to convince police to investigate Ian Watkins. So much so that she'd basically given up hope that the police were ever going to do anything. So she actually tries her best to start doing a bit of a case and building a case herself. So in March of 2012, Joanne actually goes to a Lostprophets online community, and she deliberately goes out and tries to find young mothers much like her because she feels that they're the ones that are vulnerable. She finds this woman that the court documents and the trial has only called Woman B. Right, so we'll only call her Woman B. We'll never say her name. I don't actually know her name. You might know her name, but I don't know what it is. But it's never been disclosed, right? And she contacts this woman, and the woman basically laid out that she was speaking to Ian Watkins. She was only 19 at the time, and she made terrifying confessions to Joanne. She basically said that Watkins had been inappropriate with her son, and that her son was only 10 months old at this time. So when we say inappropriate, I can't tell you how severe the inappropriateness was. The abuse.
This is as bad as it gets, people. There's no worse than this.
Absolutely awful. And I mean, again, involving substances, involving abuse. What she confessed at this time was abhorrent.
Yeah, and one of the key things to note as well, again, like, I get it. Listen, we love the comments, read the comments. Sometimes people say, well, why would you filter yourself as a true crime channel? The reason being because we want you to be able to view the video and we don't want the video to be taken down, right? when we speak about this, the crimes in question aren't just that of a sexual nature. They're also that of forcing substances upon a minor. You know, that could be fatal. The crimes are literally, and I don't mean this because it fits, they're unspeakable, mate.
Yeah, no, you can't. I have to say, mate, very often I get emotional about these cases, but I felt emotional this time because you've got young kids. And I, as a father, it was hard to talk about, to be honest with you. And let alone, and then I was thinking about all the people that were watching with young kids as well. And that's why I don't want to give oxygen to the individual instances, the individual crimes, because I feel if you talk about them and you detail what they are, you give them weight, you bring them back up into the public consciousness. And I feel like the world would be a better place if we just fucking forgot this thing ever existed. Well, but you've got to talk about it to make sure that people realise that it happened and we can't ever let this happen again.
We were doing the podcast when I think we were starting it up around the time of the Southport incident with Axel Rubicabana.
Yep.
And I remember saying to you off camera, oh, mate, I can't bring myself to cover it, sort of thing, because the children that were involved were the exact same age as my daughter.
Yep.
And stuff like that. And I just, you know, I couldn't bear myself to be sitting down and researching that case and stuff like that. However, this is something now that I feel like as the channel's grown, we do owe it to our audience, to our loyal subscribers, our members, and everyone that has supported us to cover the sort of topics that are highly in demand. That's why we're doing it. And
that's why we're covering it, right? So Joanne actually gets woman B and she gets her into a conversation. And she manages to convince her to go to a police station. So they actually try and meet up and go to Doncaster police station. Joanne gets there. She's expecting woman B to be with her and to help her basically bring Ian Watkins down. Unfortunately, Joey, she doesn't show up. So she misses the appointment. She doesn't make it. And what woman B then goes on to do is even more abuse, even more ways in which she's complicit with Ian Watkins. And so she becomes another suspect in the crime from this point on, right? So we'll talk about that more in terms of when we get to the case. Why don't you help me now, bearing in mind we've got all of that evidence, we've heard about Joanne trying her best to bring this guy down. Why don't we actually get to how he actually got caught? Because it wasn't in the way in which you expect, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was actually very ironic. And I don't use that word lightly. I use it because what he was actually accused of and looked into is something that any sane person would say is less serious than the accusations he had already had against him and they had failed to investigate, right? Now, I'm not advocating this and I'm not saying it's not a bad crime, but it was in 2012, June of 2012, that Ian was finally arrested, and this arrest came as a result of suspected substance smuggling, right?
Yep.
So the rest of the band at this time, all 5 members, and obviously not the 6th, including Ian, are all living in LA, right? I think a lot of their management are living in LA. I think a lot of their stuff, as you say, like it's quite rare for an English band or an English musician to crack the stage.
Let alone a British or a Welsh,
for
Scottish.
A Welsh musician
Yeah.
to crack the stage. Tom Jones and whatnot, and there's
very few examples. There's like, you could count all the examples on one hand.
You could. Duffy, Tom Jones, Stereophonics, I think.
Yeah, Stereophonics.
But this is what I'm saying, like, there's not that many at all. So it made sense for them to then be based in the States. Mm-hmm. Ian stayed at home. Ian, for whatever reason, which I think you can all get your head around now, liked his home comforts and probably felt like he was able to operate in a way that he wanted to more at home. However, he would frequently visit the States.
He'd travel all the time.
And he would come back and forth. And this was when it was actually reported by various parties that Ian had been smuggling Class A substances regularly over. And it was at this point when the police finally pounced. However, Ian was swiftly given bail and went back to his life. On November the 4th, 2012, Ian is once again arrested for substance possession. And as a result of this, he's also finally arrested for an accusation that he possessed indecent images of minors. And with everything that's now building up against Ian, right, you would imagine that at this point, the police are paying attention, aren't you?
Yeah, you'd imagine so. Yeah,
You'd
surely,
imagine
surely.
so. You'd hope so. He pleads not guilty and he's granted bail again. 10 days later, after being arrested for substance possession and having indecent images of minors, he performs live with the Lostprophets. Now, I'm just going to ask you the question, Josh, because I'm not saying you're any more involved in this, but as I say, like, I never knew Ian Watkins until the actual case hit the headlines, whereas you enjoyed the band's music and whatnot. So this is a very sensitive subject, and it's one that is very, very, like, highly debated and things like this. Do you believe, bearing in mind you were in the management industry, okay? Mm-hmm. Do you believe that there is any way that none of the management or of the band at that time had any idea that he had been arrested and what he had been arrested for?
No. I think, obviously, we don't know this answer for 100%
It's just your
truth.
opinion.
My opinion is that there would be no way that he would hide it from the band members or from the management, and I'll explain why. Do you know what you live and die on in that industry is rumours? And what tends to happen is there's smoke before you see the fire. And in that industry, you will have heard rumours about certain behaviour of people. And again, I think I don't listen to loads of music, and I wouldn't say I was a huge music fan, right? So I don't know what goes on in tours and that sort of thing. But what I do know is when you're touring with a band, when you're spending as much time as you do in those touring settings, you get to know people very well. And you also know what they like and what they don't like, right? And so I think the proximity in which that band were in, and bear in mind they were formed and together for a very long time at this point, I feel that they would have heard at least rumours. And when you hear rumours, you ask questions, you know? If you right now, if I knew that you were a cigarette smoker, I'd heard someone on the grapevine saying you smoke cigarettes, I'd go to your face, do you smoke? Because I've never seen you, never admitted to me that you've had a cigarette. Do you smoke? Because I just want to know, right? You would ask these questions. It's very important to you and your own life, your own morality, to know these questions.
And even the way you approach it, even in terms of, like, you could ask the question in a way where it's not a loaded gun type situation. You could say, you seen all this stuff online, what people are writing and stuff? Because that's fact. Like, there were people writing in forums. There were teenage girls, teenage girls writing in forums saying they wish they were younger so that Ian was into them. And I've seen screenshots of these things and of the dates they were posted on, right?
And the band would look at it. The band would see the forums.
Right. Now,
like,
let me tell you
be
this,
so
right?
naive.
If people were messaging certain members of the police force and things like that, and they were writing on forums, I find it hard to believe that none of the band's members had ever had a message from anyone saying, you need to look at this.
It would be like someone commenting on our videos and you saying you've never seen, like, the comment. Like, it would be constant comments and you going, oh yeah, I've never seen that. It just wouldn't be
bollocks. True.
It's absolutely bollocks. And we've got to be really careful because the band did a statement after the fact where they said they had no knowledge of it. They had no idea. And they were exonerated by law enforcement.
Yeah, of course. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying here. In this discussion we're having, we're not actually saying whether or not the band knew, but I think this whole case is smeared by people that had rose-tinted glasses, in a way,
Yep.
People that maybe didn't want to face up to the facts. And the other thing here as well to remember is Ian's the frontman, so he's always going to have the lion's share of things and the limelight and whatnot. But there were 6 other members of the band, so it's not to say that there was never accusations or anything negative written online that would be probably hypothetical and probably false or whatever about other members of the band. So you do have to understand that when you become famous and whatnot, you are going to be in a position where people are going to spread words and lies about you and rumours and stuff. But when it's this consistent, it is really hard to feel like there was no sort of prior knowledge. And there's actually a clip, isn't there, that surfaced on TikTok recently. And obviously, look, we don't know the context so much behind this exactly, but we'll just quickly play you it now.
Baby girl, what's your guilty pleasure?
Right, said Fred.
I just answered it amongst the
Right, said Fred. No,
people were watching it. Did he say what? I didn't hear.
Now, just quickly, if anyone didn't understand what was said there, it was a user with the username Baby Girl saying, "What's your guilty pleasure?" And Ian says, "You just answered it." Now, the band members, all but one, sort of laugh and brush it off, and one of them, I don't actually know the guy's name, the blonde-haired guy.
I don't know their names.
He looks like a bit like kind of concerned in that moment. We could really be reading in between the lines here. We could,
but do you know what? I've watched a lot of press off the back of this, and I think the one thing that I've learned more than anything is that he was brazen. Maybe not with the level in which we've just shown in that clip, but the way that he would just openly be so callous, and he didn't really give a fuck, did he, in some of these interviews? So I think, looking back on them now, and I mentioned the lyrics earlier on, I think if you look back on some of the lyrics, some of the music videos, there's a music video of a song that I listen to over and over again called A Town Called Hypocrisy. It's set in a children's playroom. Like, it doesn't get more overt and more disgusting than that. Do you know what I mean? So I honestly think he was just laughing in everyone's face, and I honestly feel like he felt he would never ever get caught.
Yeah. However, it would actually only take a couple of weeks until things really did come crumbling down for Ian Watkins after yet again being arrested on another substance possession charge. This time, it leads the police to search his home and seize multiple electronics, including laptops, hard drives, computers, memory sticks. But, Josh...
It gets worse, though, than that, because, unfortunately, mate, this wasn't the first time that the police had the computer. Remember when Joey was speaking earlier on about the first time he was arrested for the substances? The police at that time, it was September 2012, they actually had the computer then. Now, they didn't search the computer for 2 months. They had something which they knew there were allegations of a man. They had heard everything from Joanne that we've discussed. They've heard all of the forums, all of the messages that they've seen, plus all of the other offences that he's then been accused of. They take 2 months to search that computer. Not only did they then search the computer, they find when they do that the computer is heavily encrypted, passwords on every folder, etc., etc. Some of the passwords, by the way, disgusting in themselves, right? But they took so long. And again, it's another thing, police incompetence, police failures. They could have stopped so much pain and abuse, and they just didn't do it.
And when you say about that password there, right, mate, we can't say it on the video again. We want you to be able to watch this video. We don't want the video to be taken down. So obviously we can't say it. But if you want to type into Google or whatever, what was Ian Watkins' laptop password?
It's related to the crimes, is what we'll say.
It's a fucking admission of guilt.
It is. It is. If that's not used in the court case, then I don't know, what is.
Yeah.
That is literally evidence against his crimes. It should be. So yeah, mate, tell me, what do they actually find on these laptops? What can we actually even say?
On Ian's electronical devices, they found over 90 images involving the abuse of society's most vulnerable members. 24 of those images fell into the most severe possible category. And not only that, there were also images and videos on here of animal cruelty, some really, really sick things that we just can't go into.
We can't say. And look, what I would say before we get into the court case and that sort of thing, if you want to see the closing remarks from the court case are sort of out there and they're in PDF format. So if you want to go through all of the crimes yourself, you could do that. I don't actually recommend you do because they're so bad, but we're not going to be able to do it, and we don't really want to go into that level of detail. But no, when we say most severe category, it is the worst thing you could possibly imagine. It's awful. So now with that evidence, they felt confident enough to go to a trial, and that started on the 25th of November 2012. Watkins was originally charged with 13 sexual offences against children, and he actually initially denied the allegations. And that didn't last very long, because a day later, he comes into the court and actually admits guilt. So before the jury actually was even formed, before he even gets in front of the jury, he actually changes his plea, and he actually says that he was guilty. This isn't a benefit to any of the victims at this point. They still had to hear about the horrible crimes. They still had to hear the closing statement of the judge. They had to hear about all of his co-conspirators as well.
Well, can I tell you what it actually is, though? It's the telltale sign of a coward. This is what they all do. This is what they all do. Stuart Hazel, Ian Huntley. You look at all of them. They go not guilty first, and then when their barrister, their solicitor, their lawyer says to them, like, by the way, you do realise, like, there's absolutely no way you're getting off of this. Like, the best thing they could do is not give you an indefinite life sentence or whatever, and or we might be able to get things down. That's when they'll go not guilty, and that's when they'll go guilty, and they'll predominantly go guilty when it's their time to speak.
And do you know why he was advised to go guilty at this point, and why he actually made that decision? Not because, you know, he basically wanted to deny it as much as possible. He was advised that he'll get a lesser sentence, a lesser time in prison. Traditionally, by the way, I didn't know that until researching this case. It's about a 10% reduction on the amount of time that you'd get.
A little bit more than that.
There you go.
In this case, it may well be. But yeah, I've had loads of mates who have gone to prison. If you go guilty, it's a little bit more than that.
I think it changes based on the crimes.
If it's just a violent
which
crime,
would make sense.
fight in a pub, something like that, it would be different.
It would make sense. And again, I just feel like in this case, it just gets worse and worse and worse. During the trial, Ian Watkins shows no signs of remorse. So much so that he was actually recorded speaking with another young fan, underage fan, and actually laughing about the case, saying that it was mega lols, like basically showing absolutely no concern for all of these people that he really, really hurt. And it's just awful.
And this is why, what have I always said to you about nonces? They cannot be rehabilitated. So if you could bring back the chair, the injection, whatever, the firing squad.
This is a good time to use it.
This would be the time to use it, my friend.
Yep.
This would be the time to use it. Because I would say out of any of my mates that have been to prison, whether it was the experience or whether it was just the fact they went there when they were younger and they've grown up and whatnot, I would say that despite a lot of people feeling like the prison system doesn't do this to you, I can only speak for my friends that have been, most of them have been rehabilitated.
Yep.
Very few have ever been back. Very few. Like none that I can think of off the top of my head, right? I will die on my sword believing that a nonce cannot be rehabilitated.
Did you watch the Louis Theroux documentary about going to see nonces?
I remember it, yeah.
And I think that documentary showed it. I think interviewing those guys, I don't think they can be rehabilitated.
That's exactly it.
This is the thing, and also when they're rehabilitated, they're let out into the wide world. Who wants to be anywhere near those people?
And they say that time is a healer, right? They say that time's a healer.
Not for that.
So what you might think is yeah, he understands the gravity and he realises what he's done and whatnot. But over time, he'll heal him himself, and then he might get back to his sort of sick fantasies. This cunt was doing it outside the courtroom.
He was.
He was continuing it from outside the fucking courtroom.
Disgrace.
The man cannot be rehabilitated.
Right, we need to get into the prison time, but let me first tell you about the sentences. Ian Watkins received 35 years prison term. And that was a custodial term of 29 years. So that means that he would have been available for parole in 2031. So when you think about that, it's not a long time from right now, is it? Like, he could have been out in 6 years from right now if he had survived. So that I don't even want to think about that, to be honest with you. So that we've also got to talk about Woman A and Woman B. So Woman A was another conspirator similar to Woman B that we mentioned earlier on. They also got significant prison time. Woman A actually got 17 years and Woman B got 14 years respectively. It is a disgrace that they got that less of a time, bearing in mind how complicit they were in this. For context for you guys, they were mothers. They allowed their children to be abused. It's a disgrace that they were getting that period of time. They should have got a very similar sentence to Ian Watkins. And again, I think now, bearing in mind those level of sentences, they might actually be out.
They probably would be.
Disgrace.
They probably would be.
Yeah. So let's go on to the prison time, shall we?
Yeah. Well, Ian was sent to HMP Wakefield, described by many as Monster Mansion, due to the severity of the crimes committed by some of the criminals that are currently housed there, that have been housed there. These include Mick Philpott, a man that we did a episode on. We'll link that in the description for this one. Mark Bridger, Roy Whiting, but also has housed the likes of Ian Huntley, Robert Black, Harold Shipman and Charles Bronson. So this is it's a dangerous prison, to be honest. And it's somewhere that you would imagine Ian Watkins being, from the second he stepped foot into the prison, I would say the most hated man in there, would, want to keep his head down and would really want to have a private cell, not leave, fly under the radar and whatnot. But there's a key thing, isn't there, about Ian Watkins' time in prison? Because I just named a few names to you there, right? And let's go down the nonce route. I know it was never proven, but Ian Huntley, nonce. He had his throat slashed in prison.
Yep.
Roy Whiting, nonce. He had his throat slashed in prison. Richard Huckle, Britain's most prolific, actually, in terms of number of victims, most prolific nonce. He was killed in prison. So what I'm saying here is there's a trend, isn't there? There's a trend. These guys don't last that long in prison, right? Ultimately, there's something all of the above did not have that Ian Watkins had, and that is...
Tell me.
It's money.
Yeah.
Ian Watkins still had a sizable amount of money when he went to prison. And that meant that once going inside, he knew that he would be spending that money on the wing. And obviously this included multiple different things. But the main thing, he was paying for protection from very sort of high profile gangsters, stuff like that within the prison, allegedly.
But why would anyone want to even protect him? Like, why would anyone even agree to protect him?
Everyone's got a price, mate.
Is it that simple?
That's just a saying. I'm saying there, listen, I ain't got a price. I'm not protecting this fella.
No, but you're saying in prison there were people that they'll do anything for that level of cash.
Yeah. And what you've got to remember is the level of cash. Let me give you an idea of things, right? Nokia. Remember the old Nokia phones? Like Nokia 3210, you had one when you were younger?
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably £100 when I bought it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about
Something like
that.
that.
Yeah, fucking hell, yeah. What would they be now? Because I know you can buy them. I know the exact price.
Go on, tell me, I don't know.
Well, they're used now as burner phones.
Yeah,
And they're £15.
Oh, wow,
That's
okay.
about the SIM and the charger and whatever. But they're £15.
That's all right.
People use them as burners.
It's very Walter White, I think, when I think of a burner phone.
Yeah, there you go.
There
you go. Second cell. I'm watching that at the minute.
There you go.
That Nokia phone in prison has a worth of around £900.
Wow.
Yeah?
That's to get it into prison as well, I presume.
Getting
it to you.
Getting it to you, and
being ready to use.
Ultimately plugging it for anyone that knows what that means. And that's why you're not going to use an Android or an iPhone. You're going to use a Nokia. However, from inside that prison, he was not only spending his money on protection, he also bought a Nokia phone. He also was heavily addicted to substances inside of the prison. Now, a lot of you guys, maybe the American viewers and whatnot, might be thinking, well, hold on, like, how's he using the substances inside the prison? The prisons are not run by the guards and the screws. The prisons are run by the inmates, my friends. Like, let me tell you that for a fact. I know a few screws, yeah? And I know one screw very, very well. Right? These prisons are run by the inmates. And what I mean they're run is, when I say they're run, I'm not saying like the screws don't have any responsibility or any authority over the inmates, but there are certain high profile inmates, or there are certain powerful inmates that the screws know you've kind of got to play by their tune and whatnot. And therefore, that means that Ian Watkins was actually able to go a lot longer with just paying for substances, paying for protection, paying for mobile phones and stuff like that before anyone really was able to get to it. Now, despite being initially sentenced to HMP Wakefield, Ian Watkins continued to get, in my opinion, special treatment when he was transferred shortly into his sentence to another prison. This prison was called HMP Long Lartin, and the reason for the transfer was because his mother had had a kidney transplant. Personally, right, I know my uncle's sons were in prison when he died. They didn't get out to go and they were in there for lesser offences, by the way. Definitely not those sort of offences, violent offences they're in there for, right? They didn't get out to go and see him on his deathbed. You know what I mean? This woman had a kidney transplant. She didn't even die. He got transferred to prison. Is that not special treatment to you?
Very much so. Very, very much so. And again, another police failing or a bit of disgrace of the case.
Yeah. And after staying in HMP Long Lartin for a couple of years, consistently paying for protection, and the world knowing what this man was really about, you would be shocked to know that he was still receiving fan mail on a daily basis and had a host of pen pals. Shock behold, Ian was grooming these pen pals. They were either underage or they were mothers of children. So very much in line with what he was doing before he went into the prison. And it was actually in 2017 when he was transferred back to HMP Wakefield. And that was because there was evidence found in letters that he had been writing between him and a pen pal that suggested that she was going to explicit her child for abuse to Ian upon his release. Now, this would have been gutting for Ian, as it's a bigger prison and it's back into the unknown rather than the smaller prison in which he'd already made contacts, paid for security from other inmates. And although both are listed as Cat A prisons, HMP Wakefield is a very different kettle of fish, really, and that's due to its maximum security. Things like mobile phones, substances, and protection from inmates would cost a lot more in Wakefield. And despite once being listed as a millionaire, by 2023, Ian Watkins' fortune had dwindled to almost nothing. And as I say, this was a result of paying for protection, paying for mobile phones that he was caught with, by the way. In 2018, Ian's cell gets flipped. Surprise, surprise, they find a mobile phone. Even more of a surprise, what's on the mobile phone? Indecent texts and conversations between fans and groupies of Ian that he had been grooming from prison. He did have an excuse. His excuse was two dangerous men inside the prison who he could not name for his own safety were making him look after that phone. So once again, much like the court case, Josh.
Yeah. Complete rubbish.
Pretty pathetic.
And also it just shows you that he cannot ever be cured. He'll have this compulsion for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
This is the thing. He should never have been let out in the first place.
Oh, well, don't worry, mate, because he was given an extra 10 months onto his sentence for that. So he's clearly not learned a thing in the time he's been in prison. He's still doing the same shit. He's been proven of it twice. He's given an extra 10 months. Now, another couple of strange things that came out of sort of his time in prison was that he actually somehow managed to gain access, do you know about this, to his SoundCloud and his Twitter from prison.
I remember hearing about this, but so what did he do? Did he actually upload tracks onto the SoundCloud?
Now, it's disputed whether or not he uploaded them, but they were his tracks. They were unreleased projects and whatever that he had done on his own. There were 4, I believe, and they were all uploaded to SoundCloud and they were all put on Twitter. This was during his time in prison. Now, the reason I say it's not proven it's him is because he could have given someone his username, his password, and asked them to do it. We know he was contacting people anyway. At the same time as this, you have what's called canteen money in prison, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to spend it in a canteen. Canteen money can be to buy shower gel with. It can be to buy deodorant with. Loads of different things, toothpaste and whatnot. Do you know what Ian was using a lot of canteen money on? Bearing in mind, you obviously can't buy substances with canteen money. Do you know what he was using a lot of?
No idea. Tell me.
So So the thing that he was getting probably the most of, barring food itself, was black hair dye.
What was he on about? He was caring about his appearance so much even then.
Well, what does that tell you?
Well, I heard his hair was thinning and that he was going grey. So
well, you saw from the mugshot that he's going grey. But what does that tell you, Josh, right? The guy believes that he's getting out in 2031. He knows he's up for parole in 2031. You read the news when you're in prison, probably understanding very recently, especially, that there is a crisis in the UK at the moment with overpopulation in prisons. But I very much believe that this man was so deluded by the small amount of love, but considerable amount of love, that he was still getting inside of the prison from the fan mail and stuff like this, that he believed that he was going to get out and forge a career for himself and carry on and continue. And by the way, this is actually something that is mirrored in history. Gary Glitter did the exact same thing. Gary Glitter thought that he would live a normal life when coming out of prison and could get back and could, be in the charts again and things like that. And it just shows the level of delusion that this man had. However, the reason I say I believe that his money had dwindled by 2023 is because that is the year that Ian Watkins got the first real taste of how a nonce is treated inside of prison. So on the 5th of August 2023, Ian Watkins is taken hostage inside of his cell by 2 other inmates, where he's tortured. Basically, he's beaten, cut, stabbed, bruised, everything you could think of. And this actually went on for 6 hours. He was taken to hospital with what was reported at the time as life-threatening injuries, but ultimately didn't transpire to be, and Ian pulled through and was taken back to HMP Wakefield. Now, this attack for me marked the beginning of the end for Watkins. If he had enough money, he wouldn't have been attacked and tortured in his cell, or he would have been paying for protection from the wrong people. In fact, rumours emerged that the stabbing wasn't even out of resentment or disgust for his crimes, but rather was due to an unpaid substance debt. However, what we do know is after that attack, Ian Watkins' behaviour inside the prison once returning changed quite rapidly. An inmate who is gone unnamed but has gone on record and spoke about being in prison at the same time as Ian Watkins has said that he became a lot more of a reclusive character. His demeanour changed a lot. He was nowhere near as confident as he was before, and he became very much scared to leave his cell and was constantly needing the attention of the prison guards. And on the morning of October 11th, 2025, Ian Watkins was stabbed to death inside HMP Wakefield after having his throat slit. Now, the details are sparse on this one, but I would say it doesn't actually take a genius to work out when we actually get into who carried out the attack, and it's heavily rumoured that this was over, once again, a substance debt, which once again proves my point that this man, whether it's kiddie fiddling, whether it's substances, cannot be rehabilitated. Or should I say couldn't. Now, the attackers were 25-year-old Rashid Goodell and 43-year-old Samuel Dodsworth. And this makes me believe even more that this actually was over a substance debt, because one of the attackers, 25-year-old Rashid Goodell, and I have to read his name there, he's a rapper, right? He's a fairly well-known rapper from North London. Broad Day Yay is his rap name, and I think he's been accused of 3 or 4 different murders, and convicted definitely of one. Now, obviously, look, sometimes not everyone's lyrics mean that they're doing that in real life and whatnot, but the things he rapped about were in line with selling substances and stuff like that, and you would imagine that he was probably doing that inside of the prison. You'd imagine that he had probably sold substances to Ian Watkins. I do believe the debt theory, to be honest. Do you?
I do as well. I think it's the reasonable and logical explanation. I think there are people that potentially would be interested in a debt that will also know the case and actually potentially want to hurt him as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's probably a mixture of those things.
It'd be a combination of both.
Yeah.
Now, Rashid obviously had he was inside for stabbing a 16-year-old boy and a man in a case of mistaken identity, which is awful. I mean, look, like no one should be stabbing anyone anyway, but this kid was literally like a completely, I was about to say a normal kid. He went to the same prep school as Prince Harry and William.
Oh wow!
Like, yeah, this was a aspiring lawyer,
yeah.
I believe, and someone that was not caught up in the road life at all, and tragically lost his life. And his 16-year-old friend that he was with was stabbed in that incident. And I actually think that might have been a case of mistaken identity because of some sort of turf war, gang-related stuff, and things like that. But the other man, Samuel Dodsworth, was an SO himself. He was a piece of shit. He was someone that had kidnapped a woman and held her hostage for days whilst committing various crimes upon her. So, two characters that you wouldn't really put together. And I suppose we won't learn all that much about them and about the motivations and whatnot until it really goes to trial. Dodsworth appeared via a video link in court already, and Rashid Goodell refused.
Can we say, this is a palatable end for such a horrendous character?
What's palatable mean?
The correct ending.
I'd have liked it to have lasted longer. I've had reports that it was within 2 minutes. If your jugular is slashed, the maximum you've got is 5 minutes, but you can be done within 30 seconds. Within 2 minutes he was gone, and I don't think for those whole 2 minutes he'd have been unconscious. Look, two wrongs definitely don't make a right, and I think it's bizarre that you heard people saying release them now. Look into these guys' crimes. Like,
they're not good people, and I think venerating these people is a dangerous thing to do.
However, sometimes two wrongs do make a right. And I'll tell you why. You got two nonces there, yeah? I'm not on about the two attackers. I'm on about one of the attackers and Ian Watkins. That one attacker's now never going to get out. He was a SO. Sorry, I said a nonce. He was an SO, right? Yeah. That he's never going to get out now. Good, yeah? He's one off the streets. And Ian Watkins is gone. Good. So sometimes two wrongs do make a right. And ultimately, mate, I read out the list of inmates that have been attacked, yeah? And you can say, oh, well, there's some that haven't been. They will be. In time, they will be. Don't worry, they will be in time, yeah? This is what happens. Sometimes the justice system in the UK, and I'd say a lot of the time the justice system in the UK doesn't serve that exact word, which is justice. But ultimately, most of the time, you spend long enough in prison and the justice will be served, whether you agree morally or not. I think that a lot of people would look at that situation and think, okay, good.
I think it opens up conversations about what we do with these people more generally, though. When you've had the sanitized version when you've been watching this video of the crimes of Ian Watkins. As I say, if you want to get the unsanitized version, read the court proceedings and the sentencing documents. I've read them. They are one of the worst things that I've ever read in my entire life. I wish I hadn't read them, right? If you read those documents and you have the feeling that you wish this guy was executed, I don't understand anyone that could disagree with that, to be honest with you. So I think
I'd bring
potentially
it back. I'd bring it back for nonsense.
But this
capital punishment. I'd bring it back.
Yeah,
for
but
nonsense.
This is the thing. It opens a debate up, and not saying we've got the answers, but I think we've both got the same answer to the question. If we were asked, that's what we would want to do. When you feel how bad these people actually are, it makes sense. But look, that's not necessarily for us to say to these guys what they should believe, but that's just what we feel.
Yeah. Either way, I think that if you had have asked me beforehand, will this man ever get out of jail? I would have even said then that it was 50-50. I still would have said that because he had previous attack. Yeah. And whatnot. And as I say, we know how these types of prisoners are treated within prison. So was it a shock to you when you heard this news? No, I saw it coming. And as you say, previous attacks, it was a shock in terms of it comes out of the blue and you remember the case and how poignant it was. And it was a shock from that perspective. But the act itself, no, because as you say, there are people in those prisons that they just hate those types of people. Yeah. And
it felt like it was coming.
I mean, there was a guy, as I say, Britain's most prolific nonce, Richard Huckle. He was actually in HMP Fort Sutton, I believe, but he was offed pretty quick. Yeah. So, you know, with Ian Watkins, I always felt that would be the case. I'm surprised it's never been the case with Ian Huntley. I'm surprised it's never been the case with many others.
Maybe it will.
Yeah.
Maybe it will.
Yeah,
But look,
maybe.
we had to cover this case. You guys have been commenting and messaging us. We've had so many messages to do it. We honestly did think about whether we were going to do it or not. We had another case that we're lined up that we're going to record very, very soon for you guys. But because of the levels of messages, we felt like we had to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's ultimately not something that we want to sit and discuss. Like, we love true crime. Like, this is why we discuss it so much on the channel. But at the same time as that, there's layers, there's elements, and there's dark places that sometimes you don't want to go to. So I can completely understand that some of our regular viewers might not have chose to watch this video. Completely understand that. No worries at all. But one thing we always do, and I say this all the time, is we listen to our subscribers, and most importantly, we listen to the members of the channel. And the members of the channel are the guys that have their own footprint on this channel. When, you know, years to come and whatever, hopefully the channel continues its success and whatnot, and the members will be able to look at certain videos that have done really well in terms of views and say, I suggested that. That come off the back of me suggesting that video and whatnot. And we've actually learnt about cases that we didn't even know about through our members of the channel. So you can actually become a member. There's a link in the description. It's $4.99 a month, I believe.
That's it.
Literally less than a price of coffee in London nowadays. So
true. Yeah. So remember, that gets you access to all of the videos up to 48 hours before they're released to the general public, the weekly live streams that we'll do, and we'll be bringing back with gusto now that Joey has had his little one and I am back on terra firma, able after my stag to produce content as well. So we'll be doing a lot more of those. And before you go, there will be 2 videos on screen that we're going to recommend to you right now. There's a video on the Chris Watts case, which is an incredibly popular video and a case, again, that the members were asking for a lot. So if you want to watch that one, that will be on screen now, and there will be another video that will be recommended just for YouTube for you guys. So if you're seeing that, that's a video that YouTube thinks you're going to want to watch next. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.